Okay. Good morning. How are you?
Good
Can you
morning. I can, yes.
hear me? I can't hear you.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay. I can hear. All right. I can hear you a little bit. Um,
How about now? Is that better?
that's better.
Okay. The medicine
Okay.
speak louder.
So, good morning. Good morning. This is People Power with Priscilla. We are the people and we have the power. And this morning, my guest is JC Jacob. Is that how you pronounce your name? Jacob
Charcoal. Yeah,
JC
charcoal.
Burton, Chief Executive Officer. JC Cole, or J Cole. I know her by JC, so I'm getting kind of mixed up here. Burton Leed AP BD plus C is. I'm gonna ask you what all them letters mean too. Is CEO of Maven Construction, Inc., a Boston-based general construction. JC brings 27 years of high-density residential development experience to the team. She developed some of the very first Hope 6 projects in the country, revitalizing Centennial Place, Eastlake Village, John Hope Homes, among others. Since that time, she has helped nonprofit residential developers, housing authorities, market rate developers, and financing agencies deliver 2,300 new residential units. She has a lot of experience, and I'm going to let her talk about it. So, first of all, I want to ask you, JC, what does those mean? Those letters, LEED, AP, BD plus C. What do those letters mean? Because I'm used to PhD, MD, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Those are different type of acronyms. So the U.S. Green Building Council, which has been largely responsible for changing our building stock and how we think about utilizing energy and water. They
Mhm.
created this protocol, so to speak, a guidebook called LEED, which stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. In that, it really tries to about 20, 25 years ago now, they created this criteria so they could help reduce the amount of energy we use in our buildings, the amount of water we use in our buildings, and hopefully, and a bunch of other criteria around materials and how we deforest our country. And so about 20 years ago, they had an exam that's called the LEED AP, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, associate professional, which means that I know how to look at a building and a design of a building and build it to its highest quality. And the BD plus C means new construction. So building design, building development and construction was what that means. And it's just a designation that they have. It's difficult. It was difficult to get 20 years ago or so, and I am proud of having it because I do think that being able to build a building of any type, residential, commercial, of any sort, that should be done with the least of our resources and not the most of the resources.
Very impressed. I mean, just it's just amazing. I mean, and you have all this, you have, yeah, you have all these skill sets. What brought you to Boston? Because I know you just recently came from Atlanta, right?
Yeah,
Not
about
recently, but you relocated from Atlanta, right?
sure. I did relocate from Atlanta about 4.5 years ago or so, and several things brought me back to or brought me to Boston. My aunt Marietta Bryant Smith, she's now deceased, but she was one of the very first Black nurses at the old psychiatric hospital. So
Mm.
I actually grew up coming back to Boston to spend time with her um, when I was young, for elementary school age all the way up into high school. So Boston, in some ways, Dorchester, Roxbury became kind of a part of my second home. During the summers, our family would kind of send us across the country and come to Boston. So that's one of the reasons why I reconnect with family here. And of course, her legacy is one that has always interested me, why she loved Boston so much. And over the years, I've discovered that I love it just as much as she did.
Great, that's wonderful. So, You said you've been in construction 27 years? That's a long time. That's a very long time. So I know you must know a lot about construction, right? And some of the ups and downs. So as a young woman, what made you decide to go into construction of all the other different trades?
You know,
All
that's
the
a
different
that's
industries.
yeah, that's a very interesting story. So my grandfather, um, in segregated Indiana, owned appliance repair stores and appliance stores in Indianapolis, Indiana. And so I was actually born in Indianapolis, but raised in California. And even as a young girl, I saw my grandfather and my dad, to some extent, take things apart and put them back together. And it's actually at that point in time that I too started to tinker around with things and try to put them back together. I'm the oldest of four children, so I was often at my dad's wayside watching what he was doing. And out of that just came a love of putting things back together. And construction became kind of a natural progression to do that as a career.
It's just amazing because there's so much to construction, and as you know, we both sit on the Boston Employment Commission, and we hear a lot of stories that we don't like to hear. But also, you also sit on the Beckler board as well. Okay. You also sit on the Beckler board as well, and you So it says, I'm trying to go look at your bio. I'm just so impressed. So tell me, you worked, so you know about the Section 3 and all those different types of program. It says that you have worked Boston, Denver, San Francisco, Sacramento, Los Angeles, Atlanta, Savannah, Miami, Jacksonville, Birmingham, Cleveland, Richmond, and the District of Columbia's short-term family housing initiative. You want,
Yeah, those are a
that's a
lot.
lot
So
of moving.
it's well, but that's kind of that sometimes can be the nature of construction, right? So my very first entree into the business was actually to work um as a affordable housing, workforce housing developer with a what we would now call a startup, which was a new and is with the leadership um, there that you work on what was called Hope 6 project. This is one of the very first times where they were trying to put public money that with HUD together with private developers and create this new model of revitalizing some of our public housing facilities across the country. And it was first piloted in several of those cities, which is why I had to travel, right? They wanted to see what that looked like in Atlanta, and that's where we were based. The company was based at the time. And then it also looked different in Cuyahoga County or in Cleveland. And then it will look different in Miami, and it looked different in, of course, Los Angeles. But all of those projects were really designed to try to kind of re-envision what affordable housing looks like and have this a mix of both market rate, affordable, and then also workforce housing in one community. By and large, how it used to be, right? We used to live in a neighborhood that had people of all different socioeconomic backgrounds. And so that was HUD's attempt to try to reinvigorate um, the housing stock. And that's what caused me to travel during those projects, of course.
Wow, that must have been so that I can't imagine, like traveling all over doing different construction jobs at different cities and states. So tell me, how how long so you said that you used to follow your dad around, right? So how long so did you go like to school for construction? So you literally wanted to work in construction? Because I know we
Yes.
talk sometime and you talk about, how difficult sometimes construction can be, especially for women, especially for Black women. So, I mean, and if you were to look at you, you don't look like a construction worker, so from just, your size and, because you're small and petite. And so, but I believe you are a force to be reckoned with. And so how many employees do you actually have? And are you working on any projects currently in Boston? You must be
Yeah,
if you're
yeah. So
working, right?
I'm gonna unpack all those questions. That was a lot of questions in one. So my pathway to construction was through school. So you're right in that my dad is an electrical engineer. He went to school. He was able to go to school, even though my grandfather was not able to go to school. My dad did, and became an electrical engineer. I am a chemical engineer, and there are other chemical engineers in my family. My thought process, I didn't actually think that I would find my way into construction the way that I had. I actually, in some ways, stumbled into it. So, as a chemical engineer with a cousin that worked to develop some of the clean oil and clean gas technologies that we see that go in our automobiles now. He's working on the patenting for a large oil company in California. He got me this great job, and I put "great" in air quotes, to work at one of the labs. And he said, this will be your life as a chemical engineer. You're going to be in a lab, figure out new ways, new formulas to do things differently. And I have given you one of the best jobs as an intern because these jobs are kind of hard to come by. It was at that time that I realized I did not want to work in a lab. I was much more of a people person. I enjoyed being around people. I enjoyed creating things, but being in a lab was not necessarily the pathway that I had for myself. At least I didn't see myself working in that way. So I took a step back, right, and said, okay, well, I've got to finish this degree, because if I don't finish this degree, I'm going to have to start over. And one of the very first jobs I took out of college was working for a materials testing company. And the great thing about construction is that there's so many jobs associated with the work, right? There are so many positions. Yes, you need labor. I don't necessarily install all of the widgets. I have some portions of it. I'll talk about that in a second. But in general, there's so many jobs associated with construction, which is why I still love the industry. I worked for a materials testing company that tested the concrete strength, that tested the strength of a rebar, which is a dowel that goes in the middle of or goes underneath the concrete before we pour it, to make sure that the actual slab can withstand the pressure that we put on top of it. And it is there that I actually said, oh, this is really interesting, right? Forget about this testing that I'm doing, which is necessary and critically important to the building itself, that most people don't see. But what's really fun is creating something almost out of nothing, right? Take this blank canvas or blank piece of land in some parts of it, or we're reconfiguring a building based upon the ability to renovate and even develop on top of it. And that is actually what has drawn me to the industry. So from there, I went back to school, took a few more classes that were specific to construction, and started my pathway through the project management side, which is the office side of construction, to eventually, work my way up, right? So worked as an assistant project manager, learning how to do all the things associated with buying out the scope and partnering with subcontractors, to estimating, to eventually running a project myself, to running a team of people to run projects, and eventually to running an entire kind of business group under one construction company. So it's taken a winding road. That's kind of a simplified version of how I've gotten into the industry. But on that pathway, there's several different stops that I made doing different things. You're reading a lot about the residential part of my resume. There's also a huge retail component and a huge lab component. As a chemical engineer, I've always built and worked in labs. I just have a unique insight about what that looks like. And so it's important that even though I've been the first of many times, been the first Black woman to run vertical work in Atlanta for the construction company that I work for, been the first Black to do a lot of different things, the first Black woman. What's more important is that I know I won't be the last, and I'm hoping to make sure that I'm bringing a lot more women and people of color, specifically Black people, into the industry with me. that was part of the answer to your question. And I know that you may have more that you want me to say about that, and I can answer the other part of it.
Right, because I feel like you don't see a lot of women with their own construction company, first of all. Second, especially in Boston. So what made you decide to take the trip? Because I'm sure you were doing well in Atlanta. Um, so what made you decide to relocate? I mean, you did mention that your family lived here, but as far as the industry, because I'm sure you must have knew what was going on in Boston around, construction and compliance, non-compliance, but seems like you
Yeah,
took a leap of faith.
it's true. So there's two parts to that. One is when I worked for the company that I worked for was a very large general contract construction company. So I started as an affordable housing developer. From there, I pivoted to a general contracting company so I could diversify my portfolio of not just housing, but other product types. I wanted to have a long career. And I was also, I'm also the type of person, I'm really curious about things. I wanted to do more than just housing. And when I worked for that large general contractor, um, eventually, when I got to a leadership role as a project manager, senior project manager, I was able to make decisions on projects, right? I was able to make decisions about which subcontractors or which trade contractors worked on projects. I was able to make decisions about the team that worked with me and the responsibilities and tasks that they had on a particular project. Um, I was able to grow a team, meaning give everybody enough opportunity that they would get promoted when they worked with me on a particular project. And in Atlanta, I can say that my projects did several things. One, working for another company. Keep in mind, I'm working for somebody else. It's not my own company at the time. Um, all my projects won awards because I was able to think differently. So as a Black
Mhm.
woman in construction, what I realized is that my ability to have influence on the industry and have influence on a project was because I am thinking differently than most. Um, I am non-white male, and the industry is dominated by white male, and sometimes the education that's similar kind of looks alike and is the same. Having a different approach to it, I thought and knew and was validated by the fact that a lot of my projects won awards, won national awards, won concrete awards. I was the first person to ever use self-compacting concrete in a structural application in the entire United States. I was the first person to do a LEED Platinum project, which I mentioned to you earlier, in the United States. I've been the first to try these different technical and innovative ideas on construction projects that allow the company that I work for and my team to receive a lot of awards. The second part of that was I also knew and recognized that I had a chance to help grow Black and brown construction companies because I could determine which companies worked on my projects, right? And there's a little bit of a give and take. Sometimes Black and brown companies are under resourced, right? We don't have all of the resources. Oftentimes we don't have all the resources to do the work that others have that may not look like us. And so I personally chose and could select Black owned companies, women led companies to work on my project. So on average, I average about 35% minority participation on all the construction projects that I ran in Atlanta for another company. And I did that because I knew that there was a pathway to make sure that those companies, once they had gotten a contract from the company that I work for, it'd be easier for them to get contracts in other companies. But I also was invested in their success. I helped them on the weekends with making sure they were planning ahead for the work that was coming up. On my off time, I took time to make sure that they were successful. I helped them fill out payment applications, helped them make sure they understood our schedule. And I did that because I wanted them to be successful. I didn't want them to fail. And I wanted them to know what the expectations were in working for a large company like mine that would have been the same if they go to any other company in Atlanta at the time. And so with those two things, knowing that there are opportunities for Black and brown companies to get more work as long as some people invest in them is important. And also know that my thinking and the way that I approach business and how I approach this industry is different. And that too has a place. And it has a place here in Boston because there are, for the first time, the city and even the Commonwealth are really looking really seriously about how they change their strategies and their performance or the underperformance of Black and brown-led companies here in the city. So I feel like my timing of being here is perfect. I have experiences outside the marketplace to allow me to use some of the tools that I've seen work in other places.
So you came in 2018, then 2 years COVID hit. How did that affect you?
Yeah, COVID hit really, you know, as we were just getting ready to launch projects, then we had the 5 projects that we had in the works, which were all great projects, all great clients, all said, well, wait a minute, we don't know what we're doing. We don't know what this COVID means. And great thing is that because the Massachusetts and the Commonwealth in Boston has Harvard, it was very close. There were early indicators here in the country about what we should do that gave us an international perspective of what the virus would be. But it also means that our projects here were shut down. And so we had to retreat to some other markets where we had both relationships and active projects and expand our work there. So within the course of 2 years, Massachusetts and the Commonwealth kind of shut down construction. It was not deemed essential initially. And then in other states, they ramped up construction. So in Virginia, Maryland, District of Columbia, all of the construction was still considered to be essential. And I started to commute down to DC and down to Virginia and expand the work that we were doing there, where we're waiting for projects to restart here in Boston.
Wow, that is something. So
I'm sorry, I got a little bit of a cold.
okay, you still have that cough.
I do.
So tell me, how did you find your way to the BEC? I was so happy to see you.
Yeah, you know, under Mayor Walsh, right? I think I'd been appointed to the Boston Employment Commission under Mayor Walsh. I think that at the time the Office of Diversity or Diversity Office was looking for people that are thinking a little bit differently. And fortunately, even though I hadn't had a lot of projects in the city at the time, I had one project actually active that was ongoing when the mayor's office called to ask me if I'd be interested. What I did know is that they were more interested in my thinking around how to do something differently. In Atlanta, although it has a very strong reputation of being a city that's definitely vested in equality and equity, the industry of construction is not so much, right? So it's just as challenging in Atlanta as it is here in Boston, believe it or not.
Wow.
There are just as many challenges with having a lack of a diverse workforce working in industry here as well as in Boston. The difference, though, is that there are more Black and brown owned construction companies. So that is the key differentiation. But the workforce is still the same challenges that we have here, the same ones we have there. And sharing that with several members of the mayor's team, they asked me if I would consider joining. There was a vacancy, and they asked if I consider being appointed to that. And I thought long and hard about it because I wanted to make sure that I had the right context of understanding what our challenges are here, and if I could ever impart some of the application or things that I've seen in other places, I wanted to make sure that I could do that. So it wasn't the consideration I took lightly. I wanted to make sure that I had also the proper respect for the men and women that sacrificed to create the Boston residence job policy. And so I did a lot of homework and research first before I was able to agree to do that.
Well, I'm glad to see you on. You're there alongside of me, because I'm always going to be the one that's going to be fussing and fighting. But but you know, I really respect you, and because of the work that you do, and it's a tough industry. It really is. And so for you to be able to come and own your own construction company is truly amazing. And you know, I give you kudos. And so I know that you have created other types of different things in the city of Boston. I believe you started a incubator. Is that what you call it?
I
Tell us a
have, I
little.
have, yeah, I'm glad to. So, in starting my own company, I did that because I was making a lot of money for the company that I work for, right? So the company that I work for, they were extremely successful. And part of the success was me, that all of my projects were successful. All of my people that work with me were successful. Um, my leadership got a lot of notoriety for the company in that, again, I was thinking about the projects differently, got a lot of awards nationally. And I thought to myself, if I could do this myself, right? Like I have learned at every station what it is to do to manage a project. I know how to go into the field and look to see if something is done incorrectly or done incorrectly. Um, I know how to read plans. Like there's a lot of different steps that you need to get to a point where you're going to own your own construction company, at least in my a general contracting company. Um, I've been able to run work even as a superintendent. So there's a time where I didn't have a superintendent on the project, even working for another company. So I became that superintendent. So I understood how to get the work done in the field just as well as I did the office. And it was that unique set of experience that I said, you know, if I just had one project a year, just one project a year, I can do this for myself. I don't need this huge company to do that. So I left my company with one client, thinking that I would be in a good place. And similar to COVID, it was an economic downturn. I started the company in 2008, and we had an economic downturn in 2008 at the end of that year, in 2009. And so I found myself kind of pivoting, trying to figure out the right way to continue to move forward. I continued to have that one client, and the one client grew to 2 clients and 5, et cetera, and so on. So I was able to build an entire team. But that team did have to shrink during that economic downturn and look differently. We had to do some things that were different. We were doing construction management a lot, and we were doing a lot of owners representation before we added back the general contracting, which allowed us to kind of self-perform. So those were the differences. And again, being nimble and being small enough and thinking outside the box allowed me to do that and sustain the team. I think I had 12 people at the time. I had to sustain them and never miss a payroll. I've never missed a payroll actually. And was super excited about being able to kind of withstand an economic downturn like that. And so moving here, what I see, and part of the reason why I'm so excited to work alongside you, because I get kind of a history lesson about what's been happening here in the last 20, 30 years, especially around construction, is that there are, excuse me, I've got a little bit of my voice goes in and out at times. I'm not really sure. I had a cold 2 weeks ago, and it seems like this is the residue of this cold that I have. I still have a hoarse voice. But what I found is that there aren't a lot of opportunities for Black and brown companies to work together and to learn from one another, and for them to have wraparound support from each other. So in thinking about how to best do that comes from really a experience that I had as a general contractor. I am fortunately being in Atlanta, and if you're of Atlanta of a certain age, you are highly likely to have worked for H.J. Russell and Company, which is Herman Jerome Russell and Company out of Atlanta. He started his company, gosh, I think the company was started, I want to say about 75 years ago, roughly, by Herman J. Russell. He, along my career pathway, was a mentor of mine and worked directly for him. And he has a tremendous legacy that has lived well beyond him. He's now deceased. But one of the things that was really telling is that when I attended his funeral 7 years ago, I'm familiar with his family, and I could call his family members, professional friends, his sons, and of course I worked for his daughter for a period of time. What I saw when I went to his funeral is that I could count 39 companies, people that worked for him. It was at that time I realized it's tremendous. I mean, and those were just the people that I knew, right? I could count, this is person and they left and started this business, and this person is now an architect with their own firm, and this one is a developer. I literally could sat in the church pews and count the number of businesses for people that had worked for him. And it was at that time that I realized my daughter was with me, and she had just met him probably a few months prior and said to me, "Oh, Mom, this is the man that taught you how to build buildings in the way that only a toddler could tell you," right? And so I, at that time, said, "Oh, this is what I need to take from this, is that this is the opportunity to really work on how to build other companies, right? How do I help other people build their companies and help them grow?" Initially, the incubator idea sat dormant because I couldn't figure out, how do I do that? Do I just go and consult? I'd done it before, right? I had worked for a general construction company where I hired a lot of subcontractors. I worked with them on weekends, worked with them on off hours to try to make sure they were successful. So what would that really look like? How would I do that now? And I couldn't figure it out. So that idea sat dormant of how to do it. And then probably around 2 years ago, I had a conversation. The idea just kind of completely formed that we needed to have a construction incubator. Incubator is a platform and pathway by which people can get the help that they need to scale and grow companies. And I canvassed the United States and didn't find any, but in Boston, I found that we had actually done this kind of before, right? We had done an incubator style of growth for construction companies before. One of them was named CAB, right? The Contractors Association of Boston, right? That's what they did. They kind of helped companies with wherever they were weak, whether it was estimating or takeoffs or relationship, and help to grow, help them grow and scale. And so in learning about that, I said, well, this is the perfect platform to do it and to use technology in some ways to help companies grow and scale, but then also provide them with the wraparound support services that they need. So it's loosely based upon everything that I know that I've needed along the way as a small construction company, and programmed in a way that company owners will have a chance to get the support and support that they think that they need to help their companies grow and scale.
So having an incubator, correct? Exactly what does that mean? Is that it's like back office type work for, because I know one of the problems that we have in Boston is that we have a lot of contractors and workers who actually are good at what they do as far as the work. However, when it comes to the back office, like the payroll and their, accounts receivable, accounts payable, that's where they lack. And that's a lot of times where they actually underbid themselves. I have known of companies that have actually lost their company because their estimator. So tell us about like other parts of construction that people can do. Like I know estimation is definitely one of them, but I know there's a lot of work in construction. Everybody's not out there actually on the site. There's a lot of like back office work. So tell us like someone that might be interested in management,
Yeah.
let's say.
So I'll tell you about what the incubator does, and also answer the second part of the question. So the incubator is to provide the services that the company feels that they need. So they take a questionnaire at the very beginning, and it's either going to help them work on the administrative work or the operations. And in most cases, both. But it's hard to scale to do lots of things at once. So they're largely working on an administrative role as well, which is back office. Could be accounting, could be the accounts payable, it could be the estimating. And then also the implementation side, right? There's a very high standard for implementation here in Boston because we have these really, really large construction projects and very large construction companies to do that. And so sometimes we don't match, as a Black and brown company may not match the level of technology or service or even communication with companies. So the operations side will work on that. Maybe you need a skilled superintendent to work in a hospital application because you've never done that before. Well, the incubator will help you provide that superintendent if that's what's needed to help your company grow. And you're right. There are lots of jobs in construction is construction related. If it were up to me, every single high school student would be working in construction. We don't have enough people heading towards construction, in my opinion. And it's every single component of that. So anything from accounting, there's specific construction accounting that's different than regular accounting that is needed and necessary. There is construction estimating. If you can play a video game, I can teach you how to estimate a project. And
Wow.
that's layered, right? That's it's layered. You may first learn how to estimate, which is where people mainly start, how to estimate how much it costs to paint a wall. And then you would learn how to estimate how much it costs to build a floor, depending on the type of floor, wood floor, concrete floor, a floor with ceramic tile, a floor with carpet, a floor with, I mean, there's lots of different floor types, right? So I can spend all day talking about that. But there's a way to make sure that you learn how to estimate. So estimators are needed and offer really good job security. There are schedulers, people that understand how to schedule that work. How do you actually build the building? And then how do we schedule that? Usually you need a little bit of construction experience before you can do that, but there's still ways to understand how to start moving in that direction. There are folks that are just working on doing the payment applications and how that's sort of associated with accounting, but there's a nuance to that, to filing for that. There's folks that we call it compliance here. I really don't like the word. I think that it should be about workforce diversity. That I really would like to rename it. In fact, when I first moved here, I thought, God, I don't want to have anybody working on compliance, but even figuring out how to have a diverse workforce. There are individuals that are working on that every single day, strategically trying to figure out where the skilled labor opportunities might be and how that can match up with a diverse workforce, people that are here inside the city and in Massachusetts beyond that, if it's not the Boston city proper. There are folks that on the receiving side of that are looking at those strategies and then helping to make sure that there's accountability left in that. And those are all jobs within the company, within the administrative side. On the field side, there's a field engineer, which basically is someone that's making sure that the superintendent and that the subcontractors have everything that they need to do their job. Do they have the updated schedule? They have an updated set of drawings. Do they have the most recent request for information, which is really the formal way that you ask and answer questions about a set of drawings. So there's so many job opportunities. It's not just one, there are many. And of course, if I had it my way, they'd all be headed into construction.
So tell me, JC, how does somebody that may not want to work on the construction side, how would they go about learning like how to be an estimator? Is this basically they can just go to school, or do a company hire them? And how does that work?
It's a very good question. And there's lots of different ways to get in the pathway. There's no one particular roadmap, but the most common roadmap is that there are with now access to the internet, people can learn almost anything. You can learn anything and everything almost on your own. So I would say informally, there are lots of courses that one could take on that are offered by like the Estimator Association of the U.S. Estimators Association, which is a governing body that is comprised of estimators, and they have classes about how to estimate projects. Something as simple as starting there that you could do at home or you can do in your own time, to enrolling in a community college. Two of our community colleges here are focused on or have construction opportunities within them, both Roxbury Community College and Ben Franklin Cummings Institute of Technology both have opportunities. And then the fourth opportunity too, if you want a different pathway, is just go to a four-year university. And in that, studying construction, you would learn as part of that opportunity how to estimate a project. So there are 3 distinct pathways to get there. Even in some of our local community partners, I don't want to leave out like the Mel King Institute. They too have classes and courses on construction estimating, as long as you're enrolled in their cycles. So there are several different pathways that to get into just that one job of construction estimating. And the same could be true with others. There's Wentworth Technology. I don't want to leave out Wentworth. And
Mhm.
then because they're specializing in some of the things we're talking about.
So you it says you received the White House Champion of Change distinction, serving served as the founder and director of National Associations of Black Women in Construction, United States Green Building Council, Atlanta chapter chair of the board, Urban Land Institute, Urban Product Council, founding partner in the Center for Green Schools. Tell us a little bit about that because we've been hearing a lot about, the green plan and the green energy. Is all that around like and how has that helped your career around the green plan?
Yeah, I want to say there's a talk that I've given in the past that is coming from a place, people of color, Black people specifically, have always been green. We just don't embrace it the same way that has been commercialized in our industry and in our careers. We have always done more with less, and that is the undercurrent of being green. Um, if you are of a certain age, you know that you use the back of your album cover to sweep up the dust off the floor instead of getting the dustpan. You know that your grandmother cut out the half of the soda pop cans and or the bottles, turned them upside down and planted tomatoes and put those in the window. These are just the things that we've done over the years. And these components, as well as many others, are the fundamental undercurrent of what it is to be green. So I think as a people, we are green. We just don't recognize it that way. We and sometimes may be intimidated by the large volume of paper and documents and books that have been written about how to become green. When in essence, if we just embrace it, we are that. So the distinction that you have from that you mentioned, championing change of clean energy from the Obama administration, is one that I'm probably most proud of. And it's just a recognition that I, as an individual, have been working towards a green economy, have been working towards making our buildings more green. And fortunately enough, I was acknowledged by the Obama administration and his team of being one of many individuals working towards that. And it kind of leads up to what I mentioned to you earlier, which is about the leadership in energy and environmental design, the LEED component. And having done a lot of those projects very early on in my career allowed me to kind of look at all projects as being green. How can we make all of them green? Even when I've had clients that didn't necessarily want to get the certification from the U.S. Green Building Council, because now it's a certification, we still managed to make sure that their projects were green, that they were air quality, and that they were using less energy and less water whenever we possibly could. That work that I did led me to work with the U.S. Green Building Council, again, being one of a very few Black voices in the mix. I can say to you emphatically, when I first started to attend the U.S. Green Building Council conferences, it's been to Boston actually several times, but when I first started to attend those conferences, it's a conference of architects, engineers, and contractors all working towards trying to figure out what the latest innovation will be in construction and how it will be green. When I first started to attend the very first one, which is in Austin, Texas, there were 1,500 people, and there were 3 or 4 Black people that were there. That grew and evolved. I think that was in 1999, I believe. In 2005, I chaired the U.S. Green Building Council conference. Green Build came to Atlanta, and I co-chaired the event with a few of my colleagues that were working on green buildings. And there still weren't that many more Black people involved, but certainly more than just the 3 that I had, seen when I was in Austin, Texas. And it continues to grow, but it was because of that early work that I'd done. When the U.S. Green Building Council wanted to focus just on schools, they brought in a bunch of leaders who had been doing that work for a little while and want us to think about a new way of doing that. So we came up with this idea, was the Center for Green Schools, because a green building for a school is very different than how you utilize a a commercial office building, or even a hospital, or even a retail store, a restaurant, or anything like that. So it's very different thinking around classrooms, classroom design. There's a direct relationship with having good classroom design and test scores. And at the time, this data was coming out. We have some great schools here that got really, really good green design. I was just in Dearborn's STEM Academy last month working with those students, and I was pointing out to them how fortunate they are to be in a building with such good design, and probably how that's helped them and aided them in being able to have higher test scores. Priscilla, you and I are old enough to have gone into a class, to be in a classroom. Their building may have had no windows, right? Or the windows were just along one side of the building. And long corridors, maybe very dark, not a lot of light. Definitely didn't have access to having good quality design or things that make you think very often. And so that has now flipped on its head. And we really have the U.S. Green Building Council, the Center for Green Schools, to really push the envelope to think about how education how educating our students can be different if the design of the building was different.
Yeah, amazing,
And
unbelievable.
I know that I think that we have an opportunity to do that again here soon, right? Not all schools are green here or not all schools have really good design, I should say. Some of them are old stock that we're trying to figure out how to do something new with them. I think the mayor's office is looking at that again. So I'm hoping that my company and even folks working in our incubator will have a chance to do some of that work.
Sounds really good. I mean, it's just amazing. I just love listening to you because you have so much knowledge and skill sets around this. And I'm glad you made the trip here to Boston because because we need people like you, here. And it's truly a blessing to be able to work with you on the Beck Commission. Um, the, it's starting to get on my nerves again, but that's okay.
Yeah,
Because
and it
I
might make it.
figured they would, huh?
No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I figured our meetings probably would have got canceled, but hopefully next year, with the new cabinet, maybe things, will change. But it's just, I really would like to see a lot more people that look like me on these jobs, but also inside because, they're building all these office buildings and all this supposedly affordable housing, but it's like everywhere you go, there's construction, construction, construction every part of the city, and it's just very frustrating when you ride by these projects and you don't see people that look like us on them, or maybe one or two, And then we as vet commissioners, we're supposed to look at this and decide what to do. And it's like they tie our hands in a way. So hopefully I feel like maybe it's the way the law is written. Maybe the ordinance can be rewritten so that they won't be afraid of being sued or having to go, having God, I lost my train of thought. Um, so that they won't have to worry about always having a fight or a picket or all this stuff. It just seems like it needs to be more fairness in construction, but it's like some of the folks, they just don't care. I mean, I don't even know how many, like I know the sister, she started her own electrical company. Kendall,
Broomstein, yep,
yes, yes. And she used
commissioner,
to be at IB, I,
PW.
oh, yeah, IBEW. And so it's just good to see that women, especially Black women, are stepping up and saying, I can do this. And from your background, I mean, it's truly a blessing. I'm surprised, and you might be teaching at one of these colleges or something. You
Maybe. I
seem to
mean, I
have the,
think that actually would be fun, really, to teach. I have done that. I actually did teach. I used to drop in. There's a professor in Georgia Tech that would ask me to come to his
Mhm,
class every quarter, and so I would teach 2 classes at Georgia Tech as a drop in
mhm.
guest lecturer, which was a lot of fun. So I have done a little bit of that here. There've been The Boston Architectural College has asked me to come and talk to their students. I've done that consistently for the last 2 or 3 years. Have talked to their graduate students around what it means to be a business owner in this space, and how to think about things differently. But it would be fun to kind of see if there's a way that I could speak to more students and have a larger net. So we'll see what 2023 brings.
Maybe,
But
maybe
I
Winthrop, or the new Benjamin Franklin. That would
sure,
be a good.
sure. Yeah, I mean, they haven't asked me. So if someone if someone asks, and we'll see how we can make sure we fit it in. That's for sure. That would be great. I think that, the one thing that you brought forth that I wanted to make sure we're talking about too with the Boston Employment Commission and our oversight is that many of the only tool we really have to provide a penalty for not meeting the goal is administrative, right? It does not have the teeth to say that if you're not meeting or coming close to meeting the goals for inclusion, it's an inclusionary goal in my opinion, people of color, Boston residents, and women, then that's not really what we can penalize them for. We can only penalize them for not going through
Laid on their payroll if
the
they
administrative part
don't
of that,
go
right?
to
Which
a
is,
meeting.
yeah, which is, so yes, I think that there should be some ways of thinking about that differently. I think that what we've seen since I've been on the back, and now I do chair the back, because I've had a great time chairing the Boston Employment Commission this 2022 calendar year, is that I'm encouraging companies to create a pipeline, right? So you have to, even though the task of finding skilled labor will determine if it's an open shop project or if it's a union project. If it's a union project, obviously the union halls have a lot of weight, or should be held accountable for bringing in people of color and women. But these large general contractors that we have here can build a pipeline and partnerships with the union halls in a way that as commissioners we cannot, right? We're not necessarily able to do that in the same way. So I think that we see a change in the tide. I think from, if I just compare the 3 years that I've been on the commission, the way that we have seen, really 2.5, I guess, the way that we have seen companies move towards trying to find a pathway of a pipeline is important, because you do have to provide a way of thinking about a project. Our large projects here are 10 years, right? They're 10 years in the making. So what's easy for a general contractor to do is say, oh, I'm going to hire ABC Concrete, because ABC Concrete, and I hope that that's not a name of a company, but ABC Concrete, I can hire them now and they can work on every phase of the project for the next 10 years. It makes my life super easy. What's more difficult is for a general contractor to say, I'm going to ask ABC company to partner with XYZ company, a Black-led, female-led, Latino, Latinx-led company, Asian-led company, whichever, and ask them to make sure that they can partner and teach that XYZ company what they know, right? That's more difficult. And that's helping thinking outside the box. But the contractors have the power and the ability to do that. And there's lots of different ways that you can do that. That's just one example. Or just say, hey, I'm going to give this amount of work to ABC and I'm going to give this amount of work to XYZ. And the ABC, of course, being a traditional company, and the XYZ being a minority, female-led, and/or person of color-led company, I think is super important. So and it's been my platform to say, hey, contractors, we need you to think differently about this. And we need you to ask the small companies what it is that they need. And since they don't ask, that's why that's why
I
we have
hate to say this, but we are out of time.
Oh, okay.
A whole hour. You have to come back. You have
Okay,
to
we
come
will
back.
do that. Sure.
If someone want to reach you, quick. We have time. Yes. If you give us your information, your email, phone number, if they want to reach you.
Yeah, so if you want to reach me, the best way to reach me is going to be on email. And the email address is JC, letter J, letter C, at mavenbuild, MAVENBLD.com is the best way to reach me.
Thank you so much, JC. You have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And thank you so much for coming. And prayerfully, I'll see you next year
You'll
at
see
the
me next
vet.
year. Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's been a great time. I've had a great time.
Thank you. Appreciate you.